confidence. My guest today is Sheena Yap Chan. She's a keynote speaker, consultant, podcaster, and author on building self-confidence, and the host of the award-winning podcast called The Tao of Self-Confidence, where she interviews Asian women about their inner journey to self-confidence. She moved from having a low self-esteem to being a confident woman. Sheena uses her experience to help women overcome their self-limiting beliefs to live a better life. Her podcast has recorded over 1 million downloads to date and has interviewed over 800 women on confidence. She has interviewed celebrities, eight-figure CEOs, and more. She has been featured in multiple notable publications, including Mind Valley, Tribe Global, NBC, and the Manila Times, and many more. Sheena is one of the top 100 Filipinos to follow on LinkedIn for inspiration and learning in 2020 by marketing in Asia. Of course, that was why I actually got connected. Sheena is the best-selling author of two books called Asian Woman Who Boss Up and International Woman of Color Who Boss Up. She will be releasing an upcoming book with Whitney called The Tao of Self-Confidence. Please help me welcome my guest, Sheena Yap Chan.
Hi, Tolu. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. It's such an honor to be here today.
Good. Let's start the conversation. Very exciting. Yeah, I'm glad you can make our time to have some conversation. The first thing is this month is the month celebrating the Asian Heritage Month and also the Mental Health Awareness Month. Let's talk about the Asian Heritage Month. What does this mean to you? And with your experience, what impact does this have on people?
Yeah, I mean, it's great that we have a month where we can celebrate the achievements of the AAPI community, and at the same time bring awareness that's been happening, especially with the rise of anti-Asian hate crimes, the racism that we face, because it's important to talk about these things because for so long we've been in the background. Nobody ever knew what we were facing. A lot of people think racism against our community only happened during the pandemic when it's been happening for centuries. And that's because, our history in America or Canada was never taught in schools. Nobody ever knew that we had a Chinese Exclusion Act, that there's Japanese internment camps, that we built railroads for literally next to nothing, right? So these are all important to bring awareness. And then also celebrating, right? One of the greatest celebrations this year is Everything Everywhere All at Once, just dominating all the award shows, winning Oscars, breaking that glass ceiling. And people don't understand how long it took the actors to get to where they are today. You look at Michelle Yeoh, over 4 decades, Ke Huy Quan, the same thing, almost actually gave up acting and revived it. And now look where he is. He has one of the greatest comeback stories in the world. Even James Hong's over almost 7 decades in Hollywood. And now he's getting recognized. And so it's really important to talk about these things, right? Because, even though we talk about our heritage, our community, this goes beyond that, right? Because, people can see like, oh, here's a man who's been in Hollywood for 7 decades and now he's getting his moment, right? So anything is really possible. When you're doing something that's like meaningful work, it's going to have a lot of pushback, a lot of challenges. There will be days where it's not easy, of course, but it's also worth it, right? It's worth the ride. And especially living in Canada and America, it's important that we put we create our own seats if we have to, right? I mean, we have Canada and America is like one of the most multicultural countries in the world. And yet the diversity and the representation, not just for Asian culture, but almost every culture is still very low. And so that's why it's important to step up, to speak up, to show up, to share these stories, so that we can encourage our current and future generations to do something that's out of the norm or that's not typical, or to go for their dreams, or to, if they want to be a president one day, it's possible, right? Because now we
Mhm.
have that representation.
Good, good. Thank you so much. You mentioned something that now that seems very interesting to me, the diversity in Canada and America, which makes me think to ask you, what are the experiences you had growing up in Canada? Growing up in Canada, being somebody that was coming from the Philippines, growing up in terms of the way people perceive you, your name, the way you look, and things like that. How were you able to fit into the society?
Well, for so long, I never felt like I fit in, especially growing up here in Toronto. Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world. Like, you can literally find any cuisine in the world to eat. In the summer, there's always amazing festivals from different cultures, and that's what I love about the city, just that diversity and multiculturalism. But at the same time, the diversity, the representation is still very low. And even worse when growing up here, because I never saw anybody that looked like me on any form of media, TV, billboards, magazines, books. And so it was really hard for me to embrace my own culture. I just felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I had to have blonde hair and blue eyes and change my name to feel more Western, or to feel more accepted by Western culture. And so it wasn't until my 20s when I decided to dye my hair back from blonde to my original hair color. That's when I felt at my most, at my true self. I realized this is me, this is who I am, and I'm very happy to be Asian, right? And, representation was so important for me because there was hardly any representation. I didn't see any Asian women who are making moves, or they are, but they're never sharing their stories. There's maybe a couple that we see, which is great, someone to start off with, but I know there's so many more amazing stories out there. And so in 2015, I started my podcast, The Tao of Self Confidence, where I interview Asian women about their journey to self confidence. And being able to do that was such a huge blessing that they said yes to sharing their story on my platform. And that helped my own confidence issues in the way, because I was also looking for support systems that cater to Asian women's confidence, but I couldn't find any. And culturally, we're not told to share our feelings, to share what we're going through. We're supposed to just keep it to ourselves and never rock the boat and never make any noise. And that's how, the mental health issues start to come, right? Because we feel trapped in our own body. We feel like we're not good enough. We feel like we need the approval of others to feel accepted, to feel our worth. And we end up not even taking action in the things that we want to do, because it's not part of the path that we were led, that was given to us for generation after generation after generation. So being able to see all these amazing trailblazers just making moves, showing up, making mistakes, failing forward, I mean, that's what life is really
Yeah,
is, right?
good, good. Thank you so much. You mentioned Asian women, and that's why that the reason why you mentioned that's majorly your target audience,
Yeah.
and your explanation just made me understand the most likely reason why you chose that target audience, and that's very good. But I really want to know what a confident woman look like to you, because generally we say, well, successful people or people that are doing great things, they have a routine, they
Yeah.
have things that they do to make them who they are.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend to be the things that a confident woman do?
I mean, every person is different, right? So, how I build confidence might not work for you or might not work for the person listening here. There's certain things that I would, certain commonalities that most people do. And one of the main things that I always tell people is to be okay to ask for help. Like, we can't do this alone, especially when it's mental health awareness. Like, we should be okay to seek those resources. And in our culture, we're one of the least people to seek those resources, right? If we go and ask for a therapist, it's considered like you're crazy, right? Something's wrong with you. And in our culture, asking for help is considered a sign of weakness or a handout. But in reality, like, we should be asking for help because we have a lot of blind spots that we can't see. So, of course, we need a second and third eye to check out those blind spots so we can course correct it and show up better. And to be confident doesn't mean you have to be like loud and boisterous and be out there. You can still be an introvert and still be confident. I think to be confident is just to be comfortable with yourself, to show up as your authentic self, regardless of the circumstances. And of course, it's never easy, right? Like especially now in the world of social media with filters and AI, it's like it's challenging sometimes because you want to try and attain that standard that is unattainable. Especially in our culture, perfection is something we try to attain, and it's not real. Like perfection isn't real. We all have to show up as our imperfect selves. We have to learn to love ourselves unconditionally, and that means the good, bad, and the ugly. So I think just being able to be your authentic self, being able to share your stories, being vulnerable, being able to say like I'm not okay or I made a mistake, that's not easy, right? To show up and say I screwed up. Sorry, you know, things like that. Or just being able to also celebrate your achievements because that's not something we normally do. We're told to be humble, to stay quiet. And so women constantly always ask me, you're so good at self-promotion. How do you know when enough is enough? And you know what I tell
Yeah.
them? I tell them, I don't know. I just go out there and keep doing it, right? Because for so long we've been in the background. So it doesn't matter even if I promote myself every single day because I have something that's going to change people's lives, right? And when it comes to marketing, back in the day, pre-social media, they said the rule was somebody needs to see your product at least 7 times, at least to make a buying decision. But now in the world of TikTok and Instagram and all these other social media platforms, it's at least like 20 to 25 times. So, of course, if you just post once, not everyone's going to see it, right? Or they're going to forget about it. But if they constantly see you, your face, your products, your services, then they're going to start, oh, maybe, she has something. Maybe I'll check her out because they constantly see your face. And I know it's not easy. It's terrifying sometimes to put yourself out there, right? I mean, I've come from a culture where I'm not told to do that. In fact, if I do that, it's considered not ladylike. I'm crazy. And so it took a lot of confidence out of me to do it as well. And I realized when I do that, I'm not just doing that for myself, I'm showing other people, especially women, that it's okay to promote yourself. It's okay to put yourself out there. It's okay if you make mistakes because I make a lot of mistakes. But I think learning to show up authentically is really important. And when you can
Good,
show up as your authentic self, um, it's just a lot of weight lifted off of you. So
good, good. Thank you so much. You also said something that's very interesting to me now. You said it's very possible to be confident and also to be an introvert.
yeah.
And which made me want to ask you, because it's when you see people without you talking to them, you have a certain perception of them.
Yeah.
How do you know the difference between somebody who is actually self-confidence and
Uh-huh.
somebody who's just showing arrogance?
I think it's just your intuition, which is something we rarely use, right? You just feel it. For so long, I always shut down my intuition, and because of that, that's how things just like didn't work out the way that I wanted because for so long, my intuition is telling me something, and then I'm ignoring it. So sometimes for me, it's a feeling. Like if I feel this person seems arrogant, then
Mhm.
I keep my distance. But if I feel that this person is genuine, then we make that connection. We do collaborations, whatever that may look like. And so trusting your gut is really important. I know it's not something that we're taught to do, especially in school, but I mean, our intuition is telling us something, right? And sometimes when you trust your intuition, it may not look like how you pictured it. In fact, it could be the total opposite. But doesn't mean it's wrong. When you look back, you'll understand why things happen the way they happen.
Good, good, good. Nice conversation. This is very exciting. Intuition is something you mentioned now, trusting oneself. What comes to my mind is personal leadership. I and that will make me ask you because I'm in the sphere of leadership, communication. I'm a John Maxwell certified coach, speaker, and trainer. I'm also very active in Toastmasters International.
Nice.
So based on that background that I have, and you just mentioned intuition now, it comes to mind personal leadership. How much of leading oneself is needed to be able to build that self-confidence?
I mean, it all depends. Everyone's at different stages, right? I may be at chapter 1 and you may be at chapter 20. So
Yeah.
we all have to start somewhere, right? But
Mhm.
it's learning about the things that's stopping us. What is stopping us from leading ourselves, from making that effort, from taking action? And it's, that's the most important part of leadership. I mean, there's a lot of leadership books out there that tells you how to be a leader, but nobody ever talks about what is holding you back from becoming the best leader that you can be, right? Especially when it's Mental Health Awareness this month. I mean, talking about trauma, right? Trauma is prevalent. I mean, everyone's gone through some form of trauma, whether it's childhood, racial, intergenerational, money. I mean, we all go through that, but we ignore it, right? We think if we don't talk about it, it'll go away. But, our brain is really powerful. Our brain wants to always protect us from the bad things that happen. So if something horrific happened, like when you were 5, then they're gonna protect you from that because they don't want you to happen. They don't want the same thing that happened to you when you were 5, right? But things change, circumstances change. So just because something happened at the age of 5 doesn't mean it's going to happen again at 35, right?
Yeah.
Um, a great example, I share in my upcoming book about me failing kindergarten. I failed kindergarten for coloring outside the lines in the Philippines. And so I had to redo kindergarten all over again, had to move into another school. And that's pretty traumatic as a 5-year-old, right? You failed kindergarten because you colored outside the lines of a photo. And so up until my adult life, I kept thinking that I was a total failure. I like anything I did, I just failed at it and I was no good. Um, and it wasn't until I attended a self-development class or event in Hawaii where I realized that me coloring outside the lines just always meant I was not typical. I was just never meant to follow the path. I was always meant to color outside the lines. And so when I had that epiphany, I realized, oh, this is what I was supposed to do. Like, I just, whatever my culture told me, the path I was supposed to live, it's not for me. I was just meant to do something different. And that's why it's so important to work through our traumas, to heal from them, because you don't want it to control you, right? You want to be able to move past that and live life to your fullest. And there's a lot of people out there who are hurting, right? And they don't even realize that maybe a trauma in their past life is stopping them. And it may not even be our own trauma. It could be the trauma of our parents, our grandparents, our ancestors. Historically, Asian women were constantly seen as second class. So for so long, there's certain traditions that didn't make sense for us, right? That really benefited men over women, right? And I remember at our earlier conversation, I was mentioning to you how I spoke to a lady who lives in Africa who's a lawyer. And, we were talking about the things that we dealt with. And she was like, oh my God, we are more similar than we realize. I'm like, yeah, we are, right? Because, we have certain traditions that hurt women, beauty standards that hurt women. We're seen by negative stereotypes. We're not, mental health is a taboo. And so being able to open up to each other and share our specific stories, that's how we can bring unity. We can bring a different perspective and we can bring different solutions.
Wow. Excellent. Excellent. You talked about what is stopping us, and when you were talking about leadership just now, that makes me think about stereotypes.
Yeah.
I know that's very important in the Asian world, Asian women and things like that. So I just want to learn a little bit how you've been able to have conversations around these, because it seems like a sensitive thing to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, for so long, Asian women have been seen as quiet, submissive, and obedient. And because of that, we're rarely seen in leadership roles. We're treated as sex objects. I mean, Asian male order brides is like, something that most people talk about, thinking we're just an item in the catalog that we can order off of. And it's offensive, right? Like we're human beings and yet we're treated as items on a catalog. And so just calling out these injustices is really important because if not, then they're going to keep on thinking that this is okay to talk about. This is okay that we're treated this way. And so just being able to speak up and just talk about these things is important. Being seen as that negative stereotype also affects our mental health, right? If we're in an office environment and we speak up about something, it's like, we get this weird look like, well, why are you talking? I thought you were quiet, you know? which is wrong because we're all different. We all have different personalities, different backgrounds. I mean, constantly we're all seen as a monolith. We're all seen as that we all come from China when Asia is like over 50 countries and languages. And so also talking about that is really important because it's because of the anti-Asian hate. That's one of the reasons they think, we're the scapegoat for COVID. It came from China. So China's the blame. And then they think every single Asian person in the world is from China. And it just gets attacked to the point where even people in the Latin community gets attacked because they get mistaken for being Asian.
Wow. 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 This is something to really think about and do something about, which would lead me to ask about what are the organizations, the kind of support system that is available to Asian women such that they can know that they're not alone and probably know one or two things they can do to actually be able to function very well in society, regardless of all these challenges.
Yeah, I mean, there are organizations out there that are support systems for women. I've also spoke for companies regarding, just their upbringing and the things that we go through, so they're made aware of that. Being able to create groups, safe spaces, that is really important because people just want a safe space where they can just let out all the things they're dealing with, right? Sometimes you just need a mind dump. So you need to clear your head. And it could be listening to a podcast or talking to someone or reading a book or even just jogging outside. Those are all important. But there are programs out there that help Asian women to be leaders, that are seen as leaders, or give them the tools and resources to do that. And then having books also that touch on that or media that touches on that is important. And then even just representation, right? I mean, the vice president of the United States. She's, half Asian and half Black, which is really amazing, right? To see someone like that and realize what's possible, right? Not just for people in her culture, but just women all around.
Good, 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 good. So now that you've been in this space for some time, talking to Asian women, having conversations in your podcast and outside of your podcast and things like that, I would imagine that something might have changed about your mindset also. What are the things that you thought were this way before, but eventually you find out it's actually this way in terms of gaining experiences from having conversation with people?
I realize that most people, when they first start something, they don't really know what they're doing. And as women, we love to over prepare, right? We love to over prepare, but really, we can just start and figure things out along the way. And being able to do that is what helps you build confidence and results and opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And we want everything to be perfect to a T. We always want to make sure we don't make a mistake or fail. But sometimes it's okay to make that mistake. It's okay to fail forward, right? Sometimes our mistakes can lead us to our greatest opportunities. And so that was a big wake-up call for me because, like, I would see these people on the media and I was like, oh, they never struggled. They never had anything to deal with. Like, they're perfect, right? How come I'm struggling, but yet they're thriving? Not realizing that they had their fair share of struggles, right? Like, I was really comparing myself to them. Like, I was at chapter 1 and they're probably at chapter 28. And that's not right because we don't know where they've been. And most people who is seen as overnight success isn't overnight success. They've been putting the work day in and day out. Like, I remember I was reading a tweet from Lizzo a couple of years back, and she was just talking about how she literally had to sing at every single place for free. Sometimes they didn't even pay her. They paid her in beer just to go sing on stage, right? And so she just kept doing it to get to where she is today. And I'm glad she's able to share that story because people probably think, oh my God, Lizzo's amazing. She's so perfect. She didn't have to go through anything. She went through a lot, right, to get to where she is today. And people don't realize that. Like, life is not linear. It's all like a roller coaster, up and down, all around, upside down. And we have to learn to ride with it, right? There's a lot of uncertainty, but instead of fearing uncertainty, we have to embrace it, which is another thing. Stability is something that's ingrained in our culture. Have to have the fancy car, the white picket fences, the steady paycheck. But what happens when you lose your job, or what happened 3 years ago? We all get locked down. What are you going to do then? Right? So we have to learn to ride these waves, or else we're going to get left behind. And then our confidence goes down, and then we're not feeling good enough. And then the mental health issues kick in. And yeah.
Good, excellent. I'm talking about riding waves. You started this podcast in your podcast rather 2015,
Yeah.
and you have about more than 800 episodes out already. So what is the waves like? What experience did you have going through the waves?
A lot.
Now that you also have a book, right? You have a book,
Yeah.
Power of Self-Confidence. I pre-ordered that already.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean, even starting the podcast, I just had a lot of insecurities, not feeling good enough, feeling like, who am I to go out there and interview these people? And then back then, there wasn't a lot of people in our community podcasting. There was probably just like one guy doing it. And I said, okay, if he's doing it, I'm going to do it. Reaching out to people, it's not always easy. Sometimes you have to follow up for 4 years. Sometimes they ghost you. Sometimes you get rejected. So I'm really grateful for all the women who took the time to be on my platform. And then just like feeling small, right? Because I've interviewed all these amazing women, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I don't think they need me anymore. I mean, there's so many women out there doing amazing things. Like, who am I to go out there and talk about confidence and be that person to, elevate Asian women? I mean, there's more than enough people. And then I realized there isn't, right? It's all in my head, having that lack mentality. And so that's why it's important to have this mindset of abundance, right? Because if not, then we're not going to go out there and do it. And then even still resisting a lot, because I just never thought I was good enough. I just like didn't want to take any action because I felt like there's someone out there who's doing it better than me. So why bother? And as women generally have low self-confidence due to inaction. So if we don't take any action, we're not going to feel good. And then also we've been programmed to think, things are going to come to us. Something, like Hollywood always has Prince Charming saving the princess, right? And so we always think someone's going to save us, when in reality, no one's going to save us. And then, if we go out there and make the first move, we get judged, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we get judged by other women, which is unfortunate. And I know it's probably like not talked about enough, but as women, we have to work together, because men do it all the time. They work together. That's why they're able to move forward. And as women, we have to do the same thing. It's not about being jealous or being at the top. It's about how can we eliminate the things we still deal with today, right? Especially when they keep telling us that it's going to take like 130 years to reach gender parity. No one wants to wait that long.
Excuse me. You mentioned something that actually I think about and very interesting to me in the environment. In America, we've now trying to understand the concept of racism, the fact that an average white person will always feel that it's better than the black person walking by. I mean, it's the reality. And some people are still pretending they don't understand that. I don't know why. But the part that I don't understand is what you just mentioned. The other side of it is when a fellow black person feels bad towards another black person. Or the situation of the women that you mentioned, a situation whereby women don't want to support another woman.
These are issues that aren't talked about, right? And it happens, right? Like, I mean, racism happens within our own culture, unfortunately, right? Especially when colorism takes into place. Like, if you have darker skin, you're seen as low class or not beautiful. And I'm sure in your culture, there's similar situations, right? And it's like, why are we fighting each other? We should be getting along. And it doesn't matter what our skin color looks like, what heritage we come from. We're all still, and like we're all still like one group, right? We should be learning to work together versus working against each other. And so, yeah, it's like not talked about enough.
It's very interesting, very interesting. So now that we're talking about failures. It's one of the realities of life is that we're always going to have to try things and fail. And we actually say that part of the process of winning is losing.
Yep.
Part of the process of success is failing. So my question is, when you are going through that moment of failure, feeling like a failure or down a little bit, what are the activities you engage in, and what are the things that you say to yourself to bring yourself back up again?
Yeah, I mean, back then, before I had this epiphany, I mean, I always used to think I was a huge failure. Anything I did, I failed, and I just before I even took action, I already thought I was a failure. So I wouldn't even take that action. But now, as I take an action, I don't really see failure as failure. I see failure as feedback. You know, we either it's a everything that happens to our life is either a blessing or a learning lesson. So let's say I wanted to have a goal to sell something, right? Let's say like I wanted to sell 500 books in a month, but I only reached 150. And so back then I'd be like, "Oh, you're a loser. How you only sold 150?" Now I'd be like, "Well, you actually sold 150 more books than without setting that goal, right? You're able to make new connections. You have new clients. Those clients may have bought a book and could have bought something else, right?
Mhm.
And then you are also working on your skill of selling because I think every single person should learn to sell. I mean, it's the most important part of their business, right? If they're not selling, how is income going to come in? So I don't look at it as a failure. I just look at it as like, well, okay, I was able to do 150 books. I mean, that's amazing. I celebrate it, right? And then I celebrate all the new things I was able to learn. I celebrate all the new connections I was able to make. And yeah, it's not easy sometimes, right? Because you feel like as you're taking action, yeah, there's days you're going to feel like, oh man, I feel like a loser. Oh man, I can't believe I'm doing this. Oh, it's it gets to us, right? Because we still have a lot of unpacking to do in our culture, especially. So it's going to come up. But the more you keep taking action, the better you get. And just because you didn't get the 500, you still got 150, which is great, right? And that's something to celebrate. The part that we never do is celebrate every single moment in our life. And it's important to celebrate those because the more we keep celebrating it, the more we can attract blessings, right? I remember during the pandemic, like trying to figure out how to put a Zoom background was like so bad because I still had an older computer and I needed to buy a green screen to get the virtual background. And so I bought this green screen, and then when I set it up, the green screen went on my shirt instead of the actual background. So I was like, "Oh my God, I'm like this sucks. How am I gonna like I'm screwed." But I got it to work, and I was so happy like I won the lottery. And being able to do that helps you build your confidence because like if I was able to achieve that, what else can I achieve? Right? Then you're excited. You want to start doing the next thing. So yeah.
Good, good. That's so celebration is what you're talking about. Celebrating leads to success. Some people might think that's not necessary. Why is this is small? Especially if you're comparing it with what other people are achieving, you're like, oh yeah, this is nothing. Which will bring me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is a little bit closer to that, self-care.
Oh,
So somebody can say, well, the way I want to celebrate to apply self-care to myself is to celebrate and do things like that. So, but then, so it feels like self-care is a bigger word there. So for you, what would be your advice? What could you advise on self-care and how that can actually build self-confidence?
I mean, self-love and self-care is so important for every single person. I wish they taught this in schools because this is never taught in schools. It's important to love yourself, to accept yourself, especially when you want to help the world. It really starts with helping yourself, right? And then self-care, like I don't care if even if it's 5 minutes of your day, set aside something, create a self-care routine if you have to just step away from everything because it can get really crazy, right? Especially social media, it can be toxic at times, and so you just need an outlet to step away from that to take care of yourself. Take a walk, go window shopping, watch something on Netflix if you have to, take a jog, exercise, spend time with your loved ones, or not spend time with your loved ones. Like literally just have time to yourself away from kids and husbands and family members and customers and social media. It's really important to set that time aside, whether it's in the morning, during the day, or at night, or all three, right? It's essential. It really is essential because, especially in our culture, we're always told to serve others before self. We are going to get burnt out. We're going to get tired of it. And then we end up not wanting to do anything because we feel like whatever we do is just never enough. And we just have to constantly keep serving others to the point where we forget to take care of ourselves. So, I mean, self-care is necessary. It's essential. And it really means, what does that self-care routine look like for you?
Good, good, good. It feels like that's something that most people don't really talk about. Most organizations don't really talk about it. So far, you actually get the work done. If you can get the work done, most people are happy. So that will lead me to talk about the various things that you are doing to ensure that you're reaching out to people. And one of the things that I find out in your website, on your website, I find out you're trying to release a self-confidence quiz.
Oh yeah, that's coming up soon.
Yeah,
It's trying to figure out what your self-confidence profile is. So it'll be coming soon.
good, good. Okay, okay. And that's gonna help.
Yeah, figure out what type of profile you are.
Okay, okay, okay. So another thing that I want to bring in here that's also a problem around self-confidence is there's also a word we call overconfidence.
Yeah.
And usually people say that in order for you to connect and have conversation with people, you really have to be vulnerable, lower your guard, say something that shows that you have imperfection, and that's where you connect with people and things like that. So what is your advice on making sure that happens while still trying to project a self-confidence image that you have?
I think for me also it's just really showing up as yourself, having that intuition, what is the intention of sharing that story? Is it to help someone? Is it to help yourself? Is it to just share? Like what is the purpose of it, right? Like me, I share it because I want people to feel like they're not the only ones dealing with that it's okay to deal with that, and that, sometimes they have permission, because as women, we always feel like we need permission from everybody else when the only permission we need is ourselves.
Mhm.
So, that would be my
Yeah,
response.
your take on that. Yeah, so I mean, just we're just going through the criticism around self-confidence. Another criticism that you have around self-confidence is the people that just don't like the word self. They think the word self is not good because selfish.
No, it's
From
there's
the
it's okay to be selfish. Like, in all honesty, we really everything that we want to do starts with ourself, right?
right,
Our mindset is important. Like, if you don't believe in yourself, then you're not going to go out there and do the things that you want to do, right? It's important that you have to believe in yourself and your abilities. And it doesn't mean that you have to know everything before you believe in yourself. You just have this innate belief that you're going to make it happen. You don't know how it's going to happen, but you know you're going to make it happen. And that's why having belief in oneself is really important. You
yeah,
have to be your own cheerleader and keep moving forward, so that you can show others what's possible. And then, also be okay to ask for help when sometimes you don't have belief in yourself, because you'd be surprised how people view you, right? I always get surprised and I'm like, really? You think of me this way? Like, this is crazy. But it's also a great boost because you realize, oh, so, you know, I didn't know people looked at me this way. And so it helps you keep moving forward. Self, there's nothing wrong with selfishness. Like, sometimes we have to be a little bit selfish, right? And that means being able to step away from everything and take care of yourself for 5-10 minutes a day or longer, right? Being able to love yourself first before loving everybody else. That's really important, because being able to love yourself fully is how you're going to able to make those changes in the impact in the world, be able to serve others in a way that not only drains you, but inspires you and keeps making you have that energy.
good, good. Thank you so much. Now that we've been able to talk about self-confidence a lot and why it's important to do that. But then I still understand that it's still a fight.
Oh
It's
yeah.
still because it's very easy for someone to just get out of their house and just look down and don't want to talk to anybody and just stay in their shell
Yep.
because it's more comfortable to do that. So how do you encourage such individuals to actually still fight, to still put in the fight to be able to like say, yes, I'm going to do this. I can actually be confident again.
I mean, purpose is important, right? I mean, for me, I have a huge purpose, right? It's to elevate women, especially Asian women. So it's not just about myself, right? It's for other people. And so that gives me the courage to do that or helps me keep going when I feel down. Another thing I do is be able to look back at the things you were confident at, right? And transfer that confidence in what you're doing. Because, I mean, you look at like your list and you're like, well, I aced this test. I was able to sell this many units in a month. And so all those achievements you've made helps you build that confidence to keep moving forward. Because if you were able to do it once, you can do it again. And maybe you were confident in one thing and figure out how was I able to build that confidence to make that happen and then transfer it into something different.
Hmm. Good, good. Yeah, I mean, it's thank you for your answer. I really appreciate it. One of the things that made this conversation really important is the the conversation we have here in America, which was part of the conversation that I had in a research presentation yesterday. We were talking about health disparity that has to do with cancer and things like that, whereby it feels like people of color are disadvantaged for treatment and things like that.
Yeah.
Even the healthcare system, most people of color don't trust the healthcare system anymore. For example, during the COVID, most black people were saying, "Wow, this is opportunity to get rid of us," and by telling you, "Oh, we want to give us vaccine and things like that." So that's one side in America. That's what we're going through. In Canada, I mean, is it the same thing or what is
Yeah, it's
what?
similar. People in like underserved communities, of course, have more people of color. So there's also a bias in that. And there's articles that talk about that, saying like there's not enough proper health care or they're not, given the services that most normal patients should get, right? So it is similar.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow, excellent,
And then
excellent.
in Canada, we don't go through the same healthcare as America. We all get free healthcare as long as you pay your taxes, you have a health card, you have that, you get that availability. So, but there's still a disparity.
After disparity, and that's something that I also want to know the the system of interaction in Canada. How, I want to know how it's different in America. I'm talking about the way people of color are perceived. I just want you to give more in depth about that in terms of the way you look, your name, right?
Yeah.
Is it the same thing as we are going through here in America, or is it a little bit better?
I mean, we're known for being nice, right? But sometimes there's also such a thing as polite racism. So, like, I have a friend who got a new job back then, and she was being introduced by everyone in the office, and she's Asian like me. And one white lady mentioned her, "Oh, you look like so and so," and she only mentioned that because they were both Asian, even though they don't look alike, but just because they're Asian. So that's not right because it's like we all don't look the same. Like
Wow.
and we get that all the time, or you get like comments like, "Oh, I've been to China once." I'm like, "That's great. I've never been to China." So of course it happens, right? And then there's also good things like being able to connect with other people's cultures, learning from them. That's one of the greatest things about Toronto, but representation is still very slim. Like, I remember I was going to attend a women's conference in Toronto last year, and when I saw the lineup, it was literally like the speaker lineup was like 9 white women and like one black woman. And it was appalling because we're such a multicultural city, and this is the lineup we're seeing, and that was just last year, right? So, I mean, it's it's just frustrating sometimes that this is still happening till this day. And I know it's also up to us to go out and take the action and be that person. But sometimes it can get depressing where you go one step forward, two steps back. But I also have to realize that's just part of it, right? When you're creating something meaningful, there's always going to be pushback. And so that's why we got to keep moving forward, even if it means we have to work 100 times like harder than most people to get the message across.
Good, good. To be more specific, do white people there in Canada brag about knowing a black person or people of color? Like, oh, I have three black friends and things like that because
Yeah, I think it's like a balance, yes and no.
balance. Good, good, good. Let's move into something more serious. So now I know you've been doing this for some time, talking to Asian women and discussing in this space. Do you have any success story you want to share with us in terms of the conversations you have, the Asian woman that you've talked to, and it would be nice to know of any success story you have.
Oh my God. I mean, if you go through the podcast, I mean, they're all success stories, right? And they've been through hell and back, jail, rape, domestic abuse, bankruptcy, you name it, it's there, cancer. So it's really great to know that even though they came from such a horrific situation, they were able to turn it around and create a success for themselves. Like I remember I interviewed a lady who was born with no arms, and she's the first armless pilot. Can you imagine flying a plane with your feet?
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about how she was able to accept herself fully, and it came as walking into the school bus without her prosthetic arms because she realized that's who she is, and now she's able to embrace it, and she's been able to speak around the world, be able to make a successful career, and do everything with her legs and feet, like driving, even got black belt in karate, fly a plane. And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we feel like we're so limited, right? Our limitation stops us. But, here's a clear example of a woman who does have actual limitations, but it's never stopped her to live her life fully as herself. So being able to see that, that's like a big wake up call. Because even myself, I'm like, oh, well, who am I? I'm like this, and this. No one's going to listen to me. And then we throw a pity party to ourselves, right? But that's one success story. There was another lady who mentioned that she failed bankruptcy 3 times before she became successful. But in those times that she got bankrupt, she knows how to pick herself back up and recreate her business again. So it was a lot faster every time she got back to that. And so she didn't see it as a failure. It's just it didn't work out. But now she has the tools and resources to get her get herself back up again to keep moving forward.
Wow, wow, excellent. Good stories there. So one of the things I read about you and also your going through your podcast, you talked about breaking out of one's shell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I find really very interesting. It feels like an amount of effort is going to be needed to do that. And in my own knowledge, what I can connect with that is getting to know yourself before you can introduce yourself to the world, because that's the interpretation to me. If the interpretation is different, you can say. But then, so for me, my question based on my assumption is knowing oneself. What advice would you give to somebody who is trying to do that, getting to know himself or herself before introducing or introduction to the world?
I mean, you don't have to do everything yourself, right? Knowing oneself doesn't mean you have to do everything yourself. That's why asking for help is necessary because we all have blind spots that we don't see. And sometimes we need a second and third pair of eyes to see the blind spots so we can course correct it. So you maybe you want to join a women's group or a networking group or hire a coach or hire a therapist or read books or listen to podcasts. I mean, I didn't get here just by myself, right? I've been able to connect with amazing people who has given me different perspective on things, who've been able to believe in me when I didn't believe in myself. And then listening to so many different stories on my podcast, right? That's all support. That's all help. It's all realizing your potential. And that's why for me, it's important to create representation because we've never had this before. And I want people to realize like anything is literally possible when you go out there, right? Take action, make mistakes along the way, fail forward. And so I think as women, we always feel like we have to be the super women in everything. That's really unattainable, right? It's a lot of work. And so we have to normalize being okay to ask for help, being okay to seek help, to get better, to become better, to believe in ourselves, to make the changes we want to see.
Good, good, good. You said you mentioned something very interesting. Now, you didn't get there by yourself. I think that was why we were talking about the
Yeah,
self, like especially my Christian friends. I call some of my Christian friends advanced Christian. They probably don't like the word self, right? Because self means that you did it all by yourself,
yeah,
which in reality you had some support along the way, which
yeah.
is what you just mentioned. That was what I was trying to put across the other time. But then my question around that is, based on that, what is your take or thoughts on interactions with friends and family along your journey as you do all this? And what are the friends and family supports that you've received along the way?
I mean, yeah, of course, it's when you have Asian parents, sometimes when you're forging your own path, they don't understand what you're doing, but they've supported me. Like they just said, as long as you're happy and you're doing something, that's great. And it took a while to realize like she's doing something. And so my friends and family may not have understood what I was doing, but they were always there for me. And just knowing that is a big, it's just a big support system, right?
Yeah,
Because especially when you're doing something outside of your culture, outside of the norm, and people don't understand it, they're going to question it. They're going to ask a lot of things. It's just out of worry and love. But if you have a big purpose, you know where you're going, right? And sometimes that worry might bring you down, thinking, well, am I going through the right path? Is what I'm doing really making a difference? And so that's why having a big purpose is important because you need to figure out what is the reason why you're doing what you're doing. Because there's days where I question myself too, thinking like, is what I'm doing making sense? Should I just quit and do something else? And then I'll get a message from a listener saying how the podcast helped them or how my content has helped them in their own journey. And so I realize I'm doing something. Because as long as I'm helping one person, my job is done, right? You don't know where that person can go. What if that person can become like the next Oprah? Like, how amazing would that be?
yeah, yeah. And also, you said helping one person. It's only one person that is coming out to say that, well, you're helping me. Some others are not coming out for some strange reasons.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And you don't know there you have like, secret people who are rooting for you, right? They're not going to say it there, but
mhm.
they're quietly supporting you.
Yeah, I
So
mean, so one of the things that is really interesting about this world that we live in is when you're doing the right thing, people just assume, well, yeah, you're supposed to be doing the right thing anyways.
yeah,
What are you talking about? There's nothing special about what you're doing. But then when you do the wrong thing,
they
that's
call
when
you
you
out.
get a reaction. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our conversation. It's been an interesting conversation today. I hope our viewers were able to learn some things. At this point, I just want you to close with your last few words, whatever you want to say. Especially, let me quickly say this. Like I said, I pre-ordered your book, Self Confidence, Tower of Self Confidence. I recommend our viewers to get the book and read it so that you can understand more of what we discussed today. But then in closing, I want you to say one few things you feel like saying, and also tell us how our viewers can contact you in case they
Yeah,
want to contact you.
yeah. Well, first off, thank you again, Tolu, for having me on the show today. It's been such a blast. If there's one thing I would tell people is, I mean, if you got anything out of this whole conversation, is the fact that it's okay to ask for help. And confidence doesn't mean about making big leaps. It's just really taking it one step at a time. So if you took your first step, celebrate it, right? I always say it's the small actionable daily steps that yield the big results. So don't worry about that. Let's just take it step by step, day by day, minute by minute, because doing it that way that's how you build the confidence. So I leave you with those things. And then to pre-order my book, The Talent Self Confidence, you can pre-order it on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, any other book retailers. To connect with me, you can check out my website, www.sheenayapchan.com. All my socials are there. The quiz is coming up soon, so be excited for that. And you can also pre-order the book there as well. And if you forget anything that I mentioned, if you just Google Sheena Yap Chan, I'm the only Sheena Yap Chan on the internet, so it makes it easy.
Good, good. What an excellent privilege to have conversation with you. Even in your busy schedule, you decided to to answer to reply to this small guy from
You're not
Nigeria.
a small. Oh my gosh, no. I mean, we're all human. I mean, we're all human, just trying to make the world a better place. Don't discount yourself. You're doing great work, and celebrate it.
Good, good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your knowledge and your time. And I'm going to be reaching out. I know our viewers are also going to reach out to you. Please purchase our book, The Tower of Self Confidence. I ordered mine already. It should be, I'm confident it's going to be a very good book. Thank you for joining today, and
Thank
bye.
you.